What's going on, guys? It's Brandon back here again today for another video looking at another GM. And this time we're looking at a current one. We looked at Dale Talon at when his work with the Chicago Blackhawks. I want to take a look at the more modern era. I want to take a look at the Kyle Davidson's run as the Chicago Blackhawks GM. At this point, he and Dale Talon have served pretty much the same amount of time as Blackhawks GM. 4 complete seasons and then an off season. And it's really this season where the GM work for Davidson gets a bit interesting because we have a lot of unrestricted free agents. We have a lot of young players coming up. What's he going to do with the team? Bedard's extension's coming up. Nazar's extension's coming up. How much are they going to get paid? So we're going to take a look right now at his moves so far and tell us whether we are optimistic about the future, hopeful, or not either of those things, because I'd hope to be optimistic. So, but before he became GM, 2009, he interns with the Ottawa Senators in supporter relations. He also volunteers with the Sudbury Wolves as a scout and interns for the Rockford Ice Hogs in sales. So he was around and about. 2010, he becomes the Blackhawks video analyst. He wins a Stanley Cup with the team. And 2012 through 2018, holds various positions. In 2018, he's named assistant to Stan Bowman. In 2021, he's named assistant GM. And not too long after, October 22nd of 2021, he's named interim GM as the fallout of the Kyle Beach incident is in full swing. Bowman resigns, Quenneville resigns in Florida. McDonough had resigned the year before, and there was a whole lot of fallout from that. And then March 1st, 2022, after a small GM search, Kyle Davidson is given the full reins as the general manager of the Chicago Blackhawks. Before he even is full-time GM, he fires coach Jeremy Colleton after a 1-9-2 start in 21-22. And that was a season the Hawks were supposed to be back. They had a really not very bad season in 2021, which they were expected to be a rebuilding season. They just narrowly missed the playoffs. They have these young guys like Hagel and Kurashev. They let Suter go for whatever reason, but they have Lankin in the net as well. And then they bring in Seth Jones, Marc-Andre Fleury, Tyler Johnson, and this team looks ready to make one more run at get this core maybe one more chance at a run at a cup. Does not go that way. They lose their first 10 games. They win 1 out of their first, that's 12. And so Colleton's gone. Derek King is named interim head coach and goes the rest of the way. Does a much better job than Colleton. But overall, he takes over. At the time he takes over, it's Game 7. So he takes over October 22nd. That's right before Game 7 of that season, which is a 3-2 loss in overtime to Toronto. They end the season 28-42-12, which is 68 points. Horrific compared to the previous season, which was a shortened season. The lineup he took over, this was the lineup on the night of December 7th. DeBrincat, Doc, and Kane. Hagel, Taze, Kubalik. Hardman, that's Tyler Johnson. Carpenter, Reese Johnson, Kurashev, and Gaudette. Anyone with an asterisk means that they were there the following season as well. They would stick around for the following season. So you have Kane, Taze, Hardman, Tyler Johnson, Reese Johnson, and Kurashev. Gaudette would be claimed on waivers, and the rest would either be traded or leave via free agency. DeHaan and Seth Jones were the top pairing on defense. Jones would stick around. McCabe and Murphy both stick around, and McCabe's another one they brought in. Gustafson and Ian Mitchell, a young defenseman who was hoping to finally make his way up. And at this point in his career, he's nothing more than a 7th, 8th defenseman on most NHL rosters. In net, they had Fleury and Lankinen. Everything looked to be good for this team, and it just fell apart so quickly. Out of the lineup, or team guys that went out during the season, Malcolm Subban is traded to Buffalo for nothing. Coming in, Chad Chris goes to Toronto for Taylor Gabriel. I forgot his name. Is it Taylor Gabriel? Curtis Gabriel. Curtis Gabriel comes back. That's a wash. Alex Nylander goes to Pittsburgh for Sam Lafferty, and that was a good deal. Lafferty ends up being very good with the Hawks. Nylander bounces around the league a bit, and now he plays in the AHL. The big deal at the deadline was trading Brandon Hagel. Brandon Hagel, a 4th in 2022, a 4th in 2024, go to Tampa Bay for Boris Tkachuk, Taylor Radish, a 1st in 2023, which becomes Oliver Moore, a 1st in 2024, which is then traded to the New York Islanders, which becomes Sasha Boisvert. And it was a deal at the time that many people looked at and said, what is Tampa doing? But a lot of people in Chicago were like, Hagel's probably the best player on this team right now. What are we doing? He went full rebuild mode. Davidson. He wasn't fooling around. He said, we are tearing this thing down. We are starting over. And he started that with the Hagel trade. Radish was a former first-round pick, I believe, so there was a lot of hype around him that he can get things going. And that first, he finished the season with Chicago. He did really well. And then 22-23, he also has a really good season. And then 23-24, they put him on the fourth line, and it's over for him. And now he's just kind of bouncing around as a bottom sixer. Oliver Moore is looking to be pretty good, so we'll hopefully get that. Boisvert, he hasn't made his NHL debut yet. He's at, I believe, North Dakota, if I remember correctly, something like that. Was he the one that transferred? I don't know. But Hagel has become a 90-point player with Tampa because he's playing with Gensel and Point and Kucherov and Hedman. So Hagel really benefited from the trade to Tampa, and Tampa's really happy with that. He's on probably one of the best bargain deals in the league. Ryan Carpenter goes to Calgary for a fifth in 2024, and Marc-Andre Fleury is traded to Minnesota for a second in 2022. So they really start selling off assets quite quick there. And there were some things that made me angry, and that was letting Dominic Kubalik walk. They let Kevin Lankinen walk. Two guys that I really think they could have got something for, and they don't end up doing it. And that's a theme we've seen around Davidson. Davidson, he's good at making trades. I mean, we'll look at more of his trades here. He's good at getting those draft picks. He's done a really good job at acquiring draft picks. The question is more so of should he have gotten more, and how much more could he have gotten? Because there's some of these guys where they could have gotten something for Kubalik, who had a pretty good run with Chicago compared to any other team. And then Lankinen, he was a fine goaltender, and he started really well in 2021, and then he kind of split the net with Fleury in 22. So, I don't know. Now, before 22-23, after that disastrous 21-22 season, we know it's going to be a tanking year because Connor Bedard is in this draft. At number 7, they trade back. They had 0 first-round picks because they traded their pick for Seth Jones. They trade back up into the first round by trading Alex DeBrincat. And we see here that on draft day, a 2022 second goes to Toronto for a first in 2022 and Peter Mrazek. Montreal gets Kirby Dach in a 3-way deal with the Islanders. The Hawks end up getting a first and a third in 2022, which end up becoming Frank Nazar and Gavin Hayes, so not bad. And then DeBrincat is also traded to Ottawa for a first in 22, a second in 22, and a third in 24, which at the time, a lot of people said we were fleeced, me, myself, because DeBrincat was coming off multiple 40-goal seasons. He was probably the third best goal scorer in the league at that point, and it was kind of like, these guys are young, they could still be around when this rebuild is over. Why aren't we building around these guys? Dylan Strome is another guy we let walk for nothing, and kind of questions what we could have done had we had those players. Had we kept Lankinen, Strome, Dach, Kubalik, Hagel. Dach's been hurt a lot. DeBrincat has not really found the same luster as he did with Chicago, even when he was with Ottawa and now in Detroit. Hagel's been excellent. And Kubalik's now out of the league. So I guess we'll never know, but it's interesting. With the draft picks they've had, they're first rounders and guys who have played in the NHL. Number 7, they took Kevin Korchinski. We're still waiting on his development. Number 13, Frank Nazar, is going to be a full-time NHLer this year. He started last year in Rockford. Number 25, Sam Renzel, who may have become a steal in that draft because he came up with Chicago in the last 9 games last year and looked real good. Whether he starts the season in Rockford or Chicago, he's going to make things difficult, I think, in preseason. And then Ryan Green debuted at the end of last year. He was pick number 57, and he had played 2 games, no points, but good to see our draft pick starting to make the league. Other trades he made. Out went a third in 2022, and in went a third in 2023. That was with Arizona. A 6th in 2023 for a 6th in 2022 coming in, was with Carolina. 6th in 2022 went out for a guy named Gorman. I believe it was Liam Gorman came in from Pittsburgh. Hasn't done anything. And right before the season starts, Riley Stillman is traded to Vancouver for Jason Dickinson and a 2nd-round pick in 2024, which ends up being a very good deal. Chicago and Vancouver have done a lot of good business over the last couple of years, with Vancouver basically giving us their 2nd-round picks. In free agency, he signs Athanasiou and Domi, 1 year, $3 million each. Alex Stalock, 1 year league min. Colin Blackwell, 2 years, 1.2. Luke Philp, 2 years at $750K. Brent Sini, 2 years, $750K. He also signs Dylan Sakura, Buddy Robinson, Jack Johnson, Cole Gutman, Jared Tenorti, and Dylan Wells. Some depth right there. This team under Luke Richardson, and his first year as coaching as Luke Richardson's hired, 26, 49, and 7 for 59 points, and that was by design. That was 100% on purpose. They were going for Bedard, and they got Bedard, which we'll get to. Lineup on day one. Domi, Tyler Johnson, and Kane. Athanasiou, Taze, and Kurashev. Entwistle, Lafferty, and Radish. Robinson, Kara, and Blackwell. Defensive pairings, Jack Johnson, Seth Jones. Philip Ruse, Connor Murphy. Jared Tenorti, Alec Regula. Mrazek and Salak are your goaltenders. Of course, McCabe was injured to start that season. Taze was hopefully going to have a bounce back year after his year back after having symptoms from long COVID. And this would be the last year Jonathan Taze would actually ever play. Now he's going to be playing with Winnipeg this season. We'll see how he does. But he has not played since this 22-23 season, which there's a lot of question marks up in the air about his health. Radish would end up moving up the lineup. But not many players stick around after this year. A complete teardown finishes up with Taze and Kane not returning. Tyler Johnson, Athanasiou, Kurashev, Radish, Blackwell are the only forwards that stick around. Seth Jones, Murphy, and then Mrazek are the only other players that stick around. So, real teardown here. Out. Nick Beaudin goes to Montreal for Cam Hillis. Wash there. Nothing goes out. Ottawa ends up giving us Zaitsev, a 2023 second and a 2026 fourth. Josiah Slavin goes out to Anaheim for Hunter Drew. Jack Johnson goes to Colorado for Andreas Englund. This is a big deal. Toronto gets Jake McCabe, Sam Lafferty, and a fifth in 2024 for Joey Anderson. And going back to Chicago, Joey Anderson, a guy named Gogolev, a first in 25 and a second in 26. McCabe and Lafferty ended up getting us a pretty sweet package there. And then the other big deal. Patrick Kane gets traded to the Rangers along with Cooper Zech for Andy Walensky, Magnus Sayarvi, a second in 23 and a fourth in 25. Of course, Arizona was involved in that trade as well to take on some of Kane's salary. A lot of people argue we should have got more for Kane, but it made sense. $10.5 million, having to split that up. It's an expensive contract, and while Kane was still a fantastic player, he was not that same 100-point guy anymore. Other trades, Dylan Sakura goes out to Anaheim for Golan going to Chicago. Domi ends up going to Dallas for Domi and Dylan Wells go to Dallas for a Anton Hudobin and a second in 2025. Anton Hudobin plays one game, plays miserable in said game, and his NHL career ends there. Out goes nothing, and in comes Anders Bjork from Buffalo. Out goes nothing, and in comes Austin Wagner from the LA Kings. Not much there in terms of they get some players just to fill out the roster. Then we have go before the season of 23-24. At draft, they have the first overall pick. They choose Connor Bedard. That's a slam dunk. At 19, they draft Oliver Moore, who is the pick they acquired in the Brandon Hagel trade. Trades they made. Out went Ian Mitchell. In went Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno as Boston clears cap space. Out goes nothing, and in comes Josh Bailey, who is immediately bought out, and a second-round pick in 2026. Never understood why they bought out Josh Bailey. I think he could have played out his last season here, would have been fine, but he never ends up playing in the league after that. Philadelphia gets a second in 23, and the Hawks get a second in 24, along with a sixth in 2023. And then out goes a seventh-rounder in 2024 as Tampa clears cap space, and we get Corey Perry in return, who did not last long in Chicago before going to Edmonton, due to some circumstances that no one really ever figured out what happened. But Corey Perry ends up signing he got his rights, and he ends up signing a one-year deal here. Same with Nick Foligno, and then Taylor Hall also joins the team. Free agents, Ryan Donato gets a 2x2, and then Megna and Sanford are added via waivers. And the 23-24 season was a season of, we're just running it, we're going to be bad. We have our star forward now, our franchise guy. Let's go out there, let's just play the game, and we're probably going to get a top draft pick. And it's all right. And in fact, they did do that exactly, and they actually ended up being worse than they were the previous year. 23, 53, and 6 for 52 points. Second worst team in the league, only behind San Jose. They were third worst in this season. First line at the opening night was Hall, Bedard, and Donato. Then you had Perry, Tyler Johnson, and Radish. Reichel, Dickinson, and Foligno. Kachuk, Gutman, and Athanasiou. Athanasiou's role plummeted after the 22-23 season. They gave him the 2-year extension for $4.25 million a year. And then they buried him on the fourth line, and he barely even played this last season. So I don't really know what that one was about. On the blue line, you have Vlasic and Jones, Korchinski and Murphy, Tenorti and Kaiser. And then in net, you had Mrazek and Soderblom. Of which we talk about Arvid Soderblom now. We think, yeah, he's a pretty good guy coming out of our minors system. That season, he was unusable. Soderblom had probably the worst season I ever had a goaltender have in 23-24. Really rebounded in 24-25, which I respect the hell out of him for. Trades, there were not many made this season. They outgoes a fifth in 2024 to Vancouver for Anthony Beauvillier, and that's because Taylor Hall was struck down by injury. They were missing Foligno for a little bit, I believe. And, it was just, guys were dropping like flies out of the lineup, so they needed someone that can fit into the lineup, and they get Beauvillier. They outgoes a 7th-round pick in 2026, and in comes Rem Pitlick from Pittsburgh, who barely played in the NHL. Been buried with the Rockford Ice Hogs this last season. And then at the deadline, they only make one trade. Out goes Anthony Beauvillier, and in comes a 5th in 2024 from Nashville. So Beauvillier plays for 3 teams that season. He goes out for a 5th, and then comes back, and then he's sent out for a 5th. So nothing lost in the Beauvillier deals overall. Not much done there. And then 24-25 is his last full season so far as the general manager of the team. He drafts Artem Levshinov at number 2, Sasha Boisvert at number 18, and Marek Vanacker at pick 27. Boisvert is the result of this 24 pick. The Islanders and the Hawks, they make a trade, and they move up 2 spots. Vanacker is the result of trading into the first round with Carolina. So the trade that gets them Boisvert, really bizarre trade, which was made months before the draft. Out goes a 1st and 24 and a 2nd and 24, and then in comes a 1st and 2 seconds and 24. Really strange trade made by the Blackhawks there. A 4th and 2027 is traded to Vancouver for Ilya Mikheyev, Sam Lafferty, and a 2nd in 2027. We get Mikheyev, we get the 2nd in 2027, and then Lafferty, we get his rights, and then he doesn't end up signing with us. He goes to Buffalo. We end up getting him again now. Carolina, we make a trade with to get back into the first round. We trade 2 seconds in 2024 for a 1st in 2024, which ends up becoming Vanacker. And then a 3rd in 2025 goes to Carolina for a 3rd in 2024. So we make a lot of draft day trades with Carolina, and that continued this offseason. Free agents, the Hawks opened up their pockets a bit. They spent some money. Tyler Bertuzzi gets 4 years, 5.5. Teravainen, 3 years, 5.4. TJ Brody, 2 years, 3.75. Brazois, 2 years, 3.3. Maroon, 1x1. Martinez, 1x4. Craig Smith, 1x1. And you thought the team was going to be better? Technically, they were better, but not by much. 25, 46, and 11 record, 61 points. Luke Richardson is out after an 8-16-1 start. Anders Sorensen takes over and pretty much has them at the same pace the rest of the season as Richardson. The problem here is Bedard's teammates. The consistency of Bedard's teammates, they're getting moved around nonstop. Bedard and Kurashev both had really good seasons in 23-24. Bedard continues his upward trajectory in 24-25. Kurashev falls off a cliff. Healthy scratch most nights. And I blame that on the coaching and the inconsistencies that were there. And they don't decide to move Kurashev at the deadline, probably because there wasn't a market for him because he wasn't playing. Lineup on opening night. Kurashev, Bedard, and Teravainen. Bertuzzi, Foligno, Hall. Mikheyev, Dickinson, Donato. Maroon, Smith, and Joey Anderson. On the blue line, Martinez and Jones, Vlasic and Brody, Allen and Murphy. Korchinski plays almost the full year in the minors after he was kind of rushed to the NHL. Kaiser's in and out of the lineup. The Hawks are interchanging guys quite frequently. And then we'll get to TJ Brody actually. In net is Mrazek and Soderblom once again. Soderblom, much better season, as I mentioned. During the season, the Hawks have a lot of young defensemen, and they trade one out to get a buddy of Artem Levshinov to help him out in the minors. Isaac Phillips goes to Winnipeg for Dmitry Kuzmin coming in to play with the Rockford Ice Hogs. Carolina does a three-way deal to get Rantanen. They end up getting Taylor Hall and Nils Juntorp. Juntorp, I believe, gets moved to Colorado in that deal. Hawks end up getting a third in 2025. The problem with it is they picked up 50% of Rantanen's salary, and they got nothing for that, basically. They basically get the third for Taylor Hall and Juntorp. They get nothing for picking up Rantanen's salary, and that's why that trade is looked on not so positively. They get rid of the Seth Jones contract, though. Seth Jones and a fourth in 2026 go to Florida in exchange for Spencer Knight and a first in 2026. Knight's first full season as a starter this season is going to be very interesting. If he does well, we might have our goalie of the future. If not, shoot. Then we have Brossoit and Soderblom, who, by the way, Brossoit did not play this entire year after we signed him here. And who knows? I heard no word if he's going to play this season. They also get a first in 2026, which is to be determined. And then with a trade with Utah at the deadline, they a fifth in 2026 ends up going to Utah for Aku Rati, Victor Soderstrom, a former first-round pick, and the contract of Shea Weber, purposely for the purpose of getting to the cap floor. And then Mrazek and Craig Smith are traded to Detroit for Joe Veleno. And another rather quiet deadline. They make the move to get Jones out of the town. They traded Taylor Hall, so they did more than they did the previous season. But overall, pretty quiet at the deadline compared to this season for sure. Now, this before the 25-26 season that is upcoming, they have 3 first-round picks once again. Anton Frundell is picked at number 3 overall, as they were the second worst team again, but Islanders move up to 1, San Jose's 2, Hawks are 3. They get Vaclav Nestrazel with Toronto's pick, which was traded all the way from back up here. They trade up to draft Mason West at number 29, and that was with a trade with Carolina. They give it 2 seconds in 25, along with a fifth in 27 for a first in 2025. And then with Florida, they send a 7th-round pick in 2026 to Florida for a 7th-round pick in this year's draft in 2025. Other trades made, out goes Victor Soderstrom, who never played a game because he never signed with the Hawks. He goes to Boston in exchange for Ryan Mast and a 7th-round pick in 2025, so they pick up a 7th. They trade Joe Veleno, who they acquired here, for Andre Burakovsky to Seattle. Veleno is bought out once he gets to Seattle, so the Hawks have a new weapon to use in Andre Burakovsky. Will he bounce back in Chicago? He has 2 years left on his deal, so we'll see how he does. Safronov, as a prospect, goes to Vancouver for nothing, not much there. And then a 6th-round pick in 2026 goes to Buffalo for Sam Lafferty. Kyle Davidson's favorite player in the league might be Sam Lafferty. He acquires him up here. He acquires him again, where is it? Right here. And then he acquires him again right here. So for Lafferty, I'm fully convinced that he's Kyle Davidson's favorite player ever. In free agency, well, firstly, they hired Jeff Blashill, so we'll see how he does as his first year of head coach this upcoming season. But Tony Nato and Berezoi is going to play the minor league goaltending route with Comesso. Him and Comesso will be the tandem. Tony Nato probably going to play in the AHL, 31 years of age, only played 5 games with Winnipeg last season. Other than that, no free agent signings, and they bought out TJ Brody. What do I make of his tenure so far? It's too early to tell. He's been here 4.5 years, basically, Davidson, and I really do not know what this team's direction completely is. I'm banking on he's just going for young guys. I think he's waiting for Bedard and Nazar's extensions to kick in to get to the cap floor next season. And the question to me is, will he be trading out our expiring contracts? Will we get anything for these players? Foligno, Dickinson, Mikheyev, who else is on here? Connor Murphy. All 4 of those guys I expect to be moved out at the deadline this season. And if they're not, if we lose them for nothing, I probably will be a little frustrated, but we'll see. Right now, I still trust in Davidson. I know some people have lost trust with him because they haven't gotten him Bedard line mates. They didn't go after Ehlers. They didn't go after Marner hard enough, they said. I'm fine with that because I think that would make us too good, and we're still some draft picks out of it, and we need some of these draft picks to start coming up before we really get in a good spot. Like, we have Korchinski, we have Nazar, Renzel up there. We have Bedard and Moore, Levshinov, Boyver, Vanacker, Frundell, and Nestrazel and West. along with other guys who are in this lineup. If we want to look at, our defensemen, our defensive core is looking really good right now. We have Vlasic, who's probably the oldest defenseman besides Murphy on the team. Kaiser, Crevier, Del Mastro, guys that we drafted outside the first round as well, making a huge impact on the team. So it's going to be up to Davidson to maneuver this team the way he sees fit, make trades, sign free agents as he sees fit with this very young team that's upcoming, and hopefully I could see us back in the playoffs in 2029. If you want my honest opinion, our next time we're going to make the playoffs is 2029. I think these next 2 seasons, especially if we're going for McKenna this year, 2026, I expect if we get the first overall pick, we get McKenna. 2027, we're going to be better with McKenna, definitely. A lot of our young players will have elevated at that point, so we'll be in a much better spot. 28, I think we'll be just outside the playoffs, and then 29, I think we should be inside the playoffs if you want my trajectory for this team. Anyway, guys, I want to thank you all so much for watching this video. Let me know down below how you think Kyle Davidson has done as the GM of the Blackhawks. Let me know down below what your favorite move was by him, your least favorite move, and yeah, just let me know anything. I'm always intrigued to read comments and takes of stuff like this. So thank you all so much for watching this video, and I shall see you all in the next one. Have a good one.